Good evening, everybody. My name is Jesús Perales. I'm an English teacher, and today I'm going to talk about a very interesting topic, which is called the silent period. This is a topic that we as teachers, we really have to be aware in order to help our students in their learning journey. So let's get started. First, you may wonder what silent period is. What does silent period mean? Well, just in few words, the silent period is that phase in which students are not speaking the language they are learning. However, they spend that time getting to know what's going on around them, observing how the interaction works, and as well listening to English, in this case, because most of us work as English teachers, so they can have an idea of how the language, the interactions, and how the class is moving on. So some of the key elements that we as English teachers need to be aware are the following. The first one, the silent period is a stage that each and every student is going to go through when learning a second language. As I mentioned previously, we live in Mexico. The first language of our student is Spanish, and most of us teach English as a second language. However, this process is not only related to English learning, it could be for any other language, French, Italian, and any other languages. The second point, or the second key element, is that some students may stay in this period for a few months and others for much longer. What does this mean? That there are several factors that can affect an individual silent period that could last shorter or longer in some cases. It could be influenced by personality, social interactions, the family values, or how the socializing process is seen in their background. For example, if we have a student that is an extrovert, talking about personalities, probably her or his silent period is going to be shorter than an individual, than a student that is an introvert. So that we really have to be aware that it's not the classroom and the learning process itself, but that there are external factors that can affect this period to be, or that could take longer or shorter in terms of time. The third one is that listening and observing are the students' key activities when learning at this stage. Let's remember that students are not going to talk at first. They're going to be quiet. It depends about the factor that I mentioned earlier. But we really have to understand that even when they are not speaking, that doesn't mean that they are not learning. This is just a phase where they are processing a lot, getting to know what's going on, how to use the language, how they can interact, and they are getting how to feel comfortable in this process. Because as well, there are a lot of motivations and reasons why students are in a classroom for learning English. It could be because this is something that is mandatory in schools. For example, in secondary public schools, probably they have joined a business English course because they, in terms of, we have students that are adults because they want to improve their English skills in order to probably talk better. So it really depends on the factors of motivations, the reason why our students are here in the classroom. But we really have to be aware that most of the time when they are quiet, that does not mean they are not learning. They're just processing what's going on. As well, at this point, we have seen the definition of silent period, but you may wonder, well, teachers, what I can do to make my students feel comfortable when learning, or how can I support them in their learning journey? Well, this is something that I have come with some ideas that I suggest that are presented here on the screen. The first one is that we have to allow beginners at first with their greeting expression to be done in their first language. And we have here an example of a dialogue in Spanglish. What does this mean? What does this strategy is about? Well, probably, and as I mentioned, when we have beginners, they're starting to have the first touches with the language. So this strategy helps us for two main reasons. The first one, they can start making connections from what they learn in the classroom. For example, the farewells, the ways to greet people, the ways to say goodbye, how to interact with someone in a conversation. They can start applying. Maybe they're going to write most of the text, most of their grading production is going to be in their first language. As I mentioned, if we teach in Mexico, most of our students probably are going to write it in Spanish. But what they're starting to learn in the classes, they're going to write it in English. As I mentioned, probably the greetings, the farewells, the ways to say goodbye. So it's going to slowly adapt and make the connections about what the words mean and how can I use it in a real production, in a real context. And this is connected to the second main reason why this strategy is helpful, because when we are teaching students, we want them to interact. When they interact with others, they have to communicate, they have to talk. So it's not good if we put them in the spotlight, if we put it in the front of the class, but a great strategy is to make them interact with their peers so they can start slowly getting involved with interactions. So it helps them relax, and that makes them feel confident when working and interacting with other people. Then we have the allowance of questions that could be answered with yes or no. In this case, we are not expecting our students to probably at first to say the whole composition, right? Or their whole best manner, the best way possible to answer a yes or no question that requires the auxiliary verb. For example, if we ask them, is this jacket gray in color? We are not expecting, yes, it is. We're expecting yes. Or probably if I would have worn another piece of clothing that is red, they may say no instead of no, it is not. These connections that they are getting is to understand and to easily start making these connections of what they are learning and what they are capable to express. If it is correct, if it is not correct. The third point is focus on nonverbal cues such as body language, gestures, and appearance. Most of the time, and I said this example with vocabulary, most of the time, there are certain words that they are not even close in writing in a reference to the first language. So what we can do is to, instead of giving a whole explanation orally to the students that they are not going to comprehend, that they are not going to get it at first, not because they are not able to do it, but because they are beginners, what we can do is to use the mimic, the gestures, to exemplify and to give meaning and context about words. For example, in the case with this image, instead of giving the whole definition of what nausea means, I can present to the students, what do I feel when I have them? So they can make a connection in meaning, and it helps the learning process they are living. The fourth one is let students teach you in their language. Most of the time, the students, as I mentioned previously, they are going to be in need to communicate, to express concerns, to express doubts, to ask for permission in the classroom. So most of the time, we as teachers are not going to expect the whole response, but they're going to communicate, and they're going to try to communicate in gestures and nonverbal, with gestures, with combination of some nonverbal cues, and as well few words. Even when they do not make sense, the combination of these three factors are going to be the way they're going to start communicating and making interactions with the teacher, and as well with other classmates. And it could be said, as I mentioned here on the example, what they have seen on the classroom, on the board, on the listening, when they visualize some examples, we have to allow the error. And we have to make them know that when they make mistakes, it's something good instead of correcting them. Let's remember that the correction is going to be passively, not presenting this feedback as a correction itself, but just presenting it as a comment with the correct form. So gradually, the students, when making these relations in their learning journey, they are going to get it at the end. The fifth one is related to encourage physical expression and visuals. In this case, we're more related to visuals. We know that there are different in words that includes and variations in words in the English language. And I have said this example with apples. We have a plural, we have a certain part of the apple, we have a dish that includes apple in the cooking process or in the baking process, and as well a product. What can we get from an apple? So helping the students with images so they can start making their relations, not only one of the words, that the main word that may be apple, because they may know it already, but how that word can be involved in with other one and can mean something really different. So it's something to make a wider vocabulary, a wider knowledge of some of the elements that they already know. And I have put this like with the visuals, so making them see the example sometimes is better than just presenting the vocabulary only grading. And finally, it's something that I will encourage with intermediate or advanced levels, is to use, well, it could be used also with beginners, but let's remember that this is something that is going to happen once the silent period is already broken, like the oral or the reading production. But I encourage this with higher levels so they can understand the context of a word, because we know that we can use a different word that could fit better what we in the context that we really want to apply it. So it's better to just use the internet tools, dictionaries, or internet tool that allows us to see the context of a singular word that could have different contexts, so the student can understand the meaning in English, can see the meaning in English, and can see how the appliances of different contexts can involve a single word, instead of just using the translator that we can find in the internet. So now that we have seen what is silent period, what can we do in the classroom, we really have to understand what is the most important thing about this phase for us as teachers. And as I mentioned previously, it's something that we really have to be aware. It's something that we have to expect from our students in order to not be feeling kind of unmotivated, sometimes feeling a little bit desperate. It's something that we really have to be aware to make a safe and to set a safe environment in the classroom. Because if we set a safe environment in the classroom, the participation and interaction will be set. The students will feel comfortable if they feel they have a voice and they have the opportunity to express themselves, even when they are making mistakes at this very early stage. So the first point about this is like something that must be respected. We should not force the students to break that silence, that silent period, that silence, just because we think they are not really learning. We have to change this mindset. They are just processing. The second thing is related to the production of language. It's going to happen when they'll be ready, just as I mentioned. It can take longer or shorter for some of our students, but we have to value that ability of breaking up that silence. When they do it, it's something that it's going to be really valuable, and we really have to be prepared to make the students feel that it's okay, and they are going to do a lot of things when they'll be ready. The third one is related to make the students, make the opportunity to students to see what's going on around us. And especially it is related to those students that take or have taken longer in their silence period. When they're seeing their peers interact, when they see that the classroom, the English class, is a safe place to interact, even with the mistakes, with the short vocabulary, or the limited at the moment, the limited amount of words, of interactions, of knowledge, that it's going just to be at a specific period of time. It's not going to last forever, but when they observe what's going on around, they will feel secure when they see others, like peers, other peers similar to them, going around. So they will have this open invitation to follow up. And let's remember that when we teach kids, or when we teach teenagers, it can happen this phase of imitation. So it's really good for us as teachers, because with help with the others, with other students that have already broken this silent period, they can start encouraging their peers. The next one is related that the silence is not a sign of lack of learning. Let's remember that even if they are not speaking, even if they are not producing, that does not mean they are not making progress. They are just processing how everything is going on around and how it works. So once they feel comfortable, they're going to start producing. And As I mentioned, the error correction must be presented passively. Let's remember that us as teachers, we have this task of encouraging to bringing up motivation. So let's try to make the error correction in a way the students do not feel it that way. That could feel it as a way of just acquiring new vocabulary, as acquiring and making self-awareness of them, so they can start thinking and be aware of their own mistakes. So it would help to the learning, to each individual's learning process. And as I mentioned, the error correction, instead of being directly, just do it in a way they don't feel it is a correction. It's more of a presentation of the correct form. As an example, maybe when we have a student that comes to us and they start talking about the day they had the night before and how hungry they am, they may say, I had hungry last night, teacher. And of us as teachers, we can say, yes, you were hungry. Yes, I had hungry. And it's something that the correction does not feel as a correction itself. It's just something that they slowly are going to get it when learning and moving on their learning process. Finally, I think that the silent period is something really valuable for us as English teachers. And it's really important for us to respect this. Probably I have emphasized about this a lot, but it's something that will change everything with the learning experience. As this quote says, this quote said by Henry B. Adams, a teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops. So let's remember that we as teachers are role models. We are an image for students, more than just presenting contents. We are making the students feel prepared. We are sharing our knowledge. We are preparing them for life. So I know that we have heard that first impressions are great, but let's remember that what the students keep with them longer are not only the knowledge that we share. It's the image, the way we have been with them. So if we treat them with respect and we treat them with motivation, we motivate them, we make them feel secure about themselves, and we encourage these practices, this is that they are going to keep forever. Because most of the time, what we want to avoid is to give them a really bad experience, so they are not feeling comfortable when learning. And we, with certain words, with corrections, with the way we are, when we are not respecting this period of silence, we can break this with thread that is really delicate, and it can influence forever. So if we do not respect all of this, we can cause to a student to give up. And this is something that we really don't want to do it. I hope you like the explanation, and I hope you have enjoyed and learned a lot. So thank you for coming. See you next time. Bye.